Ambulance paramedics, saving lives in our communities.
Next speaker is Dr. Christopher Forrester. On deck will be Sarah Henderson.
Welcome. Good evening. I'm Dr. Forrester. Thank you very much for giving me a few minutes of your time this evening to speak about this very important issue. So, of course, it's a huge decision when you're looking at how you're going to deliver land ambulance services for your residents, and even if it's been delayed by a few years for the ultimate decision, it's still something that deserves a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of great debate, but what seems to be lost in much of it is the question of what's really best for the patients. So that's what I wanted to raise 3 issues briefly on tonight. And I think that after considering these 3 points, you'll see that the best care will continue to come from professional paramedics working for an independent ambulance service. So the first thing that I want to just step back and recognize is that fires and pre-hospital medical emergencies are inherently different. They actually have virtually nothing in common. They require different responses from different responders. It's been suggested to you that firefighters across the province already play a major role in medical responses, and this is simply not true. With the exception of pre-hospital cardiac arrests, there's not a major role for the fire department in improving the patient care provided. In the specific case of cardiac arrest, anybody who arrives with a defibrillator sooner, whether that be a paramedic, a layperson, a firefighter, is likely to help that patient. But aside from that, there's not a major role for the fire services overall in actually improving the care. So cardiac arrests are the major thing that we can say there's actually a benefit from. How much does that actually make up of the general work of an ambulance service? And the truth is, if we look at calls in terms of cardiac arrests versus everything else, cardiac arrests are well under 1% of the work of an ambulance service. And you can continue to have the fire department being tiered to join paramedics on these calls if they can get a defibrillator to the patient's side sooner without any integration of services. So it's been suggested to you that this is a natural coupling of services, and this is simply not the case. These are completely different professions with different expertise. It's also been suggested to you that response times are the big way that this is going to be so beneficial to patients. This is completely in line with what the Ontario Professional Firefighters Association talking points are all based around. It's something that's a nice talking point because it seems intuitive. You think having a responder at a patient's side would improve their outcome, but again, with the exception of cardiac arrest, which makes up less than 1% of the work of paramedics, there's no evidence that saving seconds or even a few minutes is going to improve patients' outcomes. The best patient care will come from having a clinician with the clinical acumen of a paramedic who practices the full scope of paramedicine, including that on-scene assessment and management, the ongoing care during transport, and that handover to the emergency department staff where so many critical details need to be passed along. If you're not actually practicing that full scope of clinical care, the full scope of paramedicine, you're not going to have that clinical acumen to provide the highest level of pre-hospital care for your residents. So although response times are one measure of the quality of service, it's really a poor measure for the overall quality of care. But it's largely what a proposal like this is based around. And finally, a lot of what's suggested in the proposal is simply outlandish claims of what supposedly is going to happen and how bright the future will be. But if you actually read into these claims, and there's just a small sampling here, they're simply not supported. We see things like an improved level of safety for emergency first responders. It's never articulated in that initial proposal document how this is going to come about, or what the safety issues are for first responders right now that aren't being addressed. If there is something, that should probably be addressed before a merger even happens. It talks about operational synergies and interoperability. It's a wonderful buzzword to say operational synergies, but it's meaningless. What is wrong with how fire and EMS work together now for their independent roles? And could that not be addressed through some means other than integration? And finally, they talk about economies of scale. And of course, this is just a selection since we only have a few minutes to speak tonight. But economies of scale. Firefighters will continue to need hoses. Paramedics will continue to need stretchers. Economies of scale has nothing to do with this. So with so many unsubstantiated claims like this being made, it would make you wonder about the overall proposal and what the motives behind it are. Is the goal really to improve the quality of care for your residents, or is there something else at play? So in summary, pre-hospital medical emergencies and fires are inherently different. They require different responses from different responders. Response times are a poor measure of the quality of care, and when promises such as those have been made in the Model C proposal that aren't substantiated, you should wonder about the overall report and whether it's really based around improving the quality of clinical care for your residents. Thank you very much.
Ambulance paramedics, saving lives in our communities.